What is happening, guys? Welcome back to Redbeard's Garage. And a couple videos ago, we bought the cheapest Chinese parts we could find on Amazon, Chinese performance parts, and we put them to the test in a Predator 212 engine. If you guys remember, on the dyno, it actually vibrated the side cover bolts out, and we quickly found out when we was trail riding why that happened. This engine vibrates extremely bad, and it's probably due to the heavy piston and the parts not being balanced, as well as something like an EC forged rod or an ARC billet rod. Now, we used a knockoff rod, a ceramic coated flat top piston, and the knockoff 1.3 gauge ratio rockers. So Gauge is the name brand. China just copied them. I'm assuming someone sent the parts to China to knock them off so they could get a cheaper part on the market. But now it's time to, after about 10 hours of hard riding on this engine, it's a good time to tear it down and look inside and see how all these parts are wearing. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We just got back from one of our meetups where we rode this bike about 8 hours, and we had about 2 hours on it before this meetup. So let's change the oil first, drain it out, and see how bad it looks, and then we can pull that engine off the bike, tear into it to see how it's wearing. So let's get right into it. So I don't know if you can see the metallic color to that oil, but it's definitely metallic-y. Can you see the swirls? So definitely had some metal in it. I mean, you can see it really strong right there. So this is the super pipe for this bike. I'm not a fan of these ROV mufflers. They just sound, I don't know, they're just like a loud fart noise. But I don't know if you can see in there, this top or this outside layer is fine, but the next layer is starting to break down. Blew a hole through it. You'll eventually get these things rattling like crazy. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and order a muffler. We're gonna cut this pipe off here, get rid of this ROV, and put one of the motorcycle mufflers we like to run on there. We can build a mount off this when we put this thing back together. We did lose a few bolts, but somehow our cup washer stuck on there. It's stuck like glue on there. So definitely, this thing vibrates horrendously with these Chinese parts, and that's one thing you get with cheaper parts. So we're definitely going to blue Loctite all the. I think that's why this honestly vibrated loose on the dyno, was just not having Loctite. So we're gonna make sure to Loctite everything. We'll go ahead and pull the valve cover carb, get this thing disassembled. Our rockers actually look really good. There's a little like discoloration on this roller, but it doesn't have any grooves I can feel. It's just like the, you know, the blackened coating from the harden process is wore off. So that's pretty good so far. I thought this would be the biggest part that would have wear, but seems like everything is, you know, let's see what our, I think I set these at 3 thousandths. So real loose, so definitely would have needed tightened up. Let's see if it's as bad to use a 10 thousandths. Yep, a 10 fits. I don't think a 10 fits in there. Here's a 5. Again, a 5 fits and drags side to side, but it's getting tighter, so it's probably around 6 thousandths. So those would have needed to be adjusted. They actually look pretty good. I mean, I don't see anything to complain about, so these held up really well. I will say this style carb isn't my favorite, but these WC22s are tuned very well. My favorite is a 24 mil flat slide Mikuni, like a true one. But these things work actually really good, and for the price, you can buy 2 of these for the price of 1 Mikuni. So it's hard to beat these WC22s. We've had a lot of people reach out to us and tell us their experience with these over, you know, some of the Chinese clones and stuff, and they've had better luck, hands down, out of these carbs. So it doesn't look like we have much dirt in there, so that's pretty good. Everything's pretty clean. The grounding strap. Oh, that one was about to fall out. Definitely putting blue Loctite on those before putting this back together. Just loosening that to let this fall down. Looks like our tune was really close. I mean, that's the color I like, a little bronze color. So it's not bad in my opinion. Cylinder looks really good. It still has all the crosshatch. So that piston is working pretty well. Let's see if we got any side movement in our piston. We are in the hole quite a bit. This piston, we won't be reusing this head gasket, but it held really good. The biggest place to look is right here where it's the thinnest. You can tell it's thicker down here. So normally if you blow a head gasket, it's here, here, or even over here. That held up good. We'll see if we can see any kind of side. I don't see much side movement. A little bit, not bad though. So this is what we was seeing in that oil. It's just all metallic. It's quite a bit more than we usually see. And when we put this together this time, after this inspection, we're going to check the crank walk, because I think there's quite a bit of it, you know, with this crank walking, and I didn't put the shims on. So I'm definitely going to need to do that this go around, because I can see where the crank's been smacking the side cover. Cam looks great, which this wasn't a Chinese part. It was like a Bonsai 265. Cam looks immaculate. Lifters look good. Both of them. These are stock lifters. We didn't run billet or anything. Now, let's take this rod off. 1/4 inch 12 point. Honestly, I don't think that looks too bad. Not bad at all. The coating looks really good on this piston. I don't know if you guys can see that. Side skirts look relatively good. You can still see the coating held up pretty good. You can see a little wear there. For the most part, she looks pretty good. I'm gonna clean this thing really good with brake cleaner, get the top cleaned off to see how it wore. So all in all, I think everything wore really good, is breaking in really good. This is the normal wear that you see on a rod bearing. It's nothing crazy. That chrome coating starts to wear off and it looks more like aluminum, because that's what the rod bearings are. The coating, I was surprised to see the ceramic coating. Still has some soot on it, but I scraped off quite a bit and cleaned it. All of the coating still on there. There's a little bit wore off one edge, which is the upper of the piston edge. This is the piston arrow pointing down, but you can see possibly there's a little light colored edge there. but nothing bad. Like, pretty surprised. But I'm telling you guys, this thing vibrated like the dickens. It was horrible. Actually, we had Carol, the owner of EC Carburetors, riding this bike, and he rode it on one trip, and then when we got back, he was like, I definitely don't want to take that bike out again. So we let him ride a buggy because it it almost made your hands numb. It vibrated like cruising speeds. If you really revved it out, it got a little better, but around the 4,000 to 4,500 RPMs, it was horrendous. And so they was reporting that the rod they got was cast. This one does, to me, look like a true billet rod. So that's one thing. But the bearing hole doesn't line up. I did notice that. If you can see, that's like half blocked. So that's funny. They didn't get the hole in the dead right spot. But this piston is just a really heavy piston, and when you're slinging that thing around like this, it's going to give vibration. So I think we're good though. Other than that, I mean, rings look good. The cylinder still has a great looking crosshatch on it. Don't think I'm going to do anything but put the thing back together. Ratio rockers look great. Hey, it was mainly the ratio rockers, this rod and piston. Everything looks to be wearing really good. So I guess we run it for another hard couple rides, and then we tear it back down and keep inspecting it. Holding up good though. A lot of vibrations. I am going to fix the crankshaft walk, you know, to get it down to about 10 thousandths or so, maybe a hair bit less, because you can see on the end of the crankshaft where it was. You'll get a lot of noise out of that as well. So I'm going to put this back together, and we'll get it put back on the bike, keep running it. I just went to torque this thing in here, torquing it back to 150 inch-pounds, and what do you notice? Snap the lower bolt. So these bolts are technically torque to yield bolts, which means you torque them once, you throw them away, and ARC uses ARP bolts, which is the highest quality bolts you can get. We have some ARP, it's all confusing. These are ARP bolts these are big block bolts, but super high quality. China, since we went with this cheap rod, it comes with a knockoff. So when you torque these, you're supposed to like loosen them, then retorque them, because the bolt does stretch when you do that. This wouldn't even handle 150 inch-pounds, and it broke. I got to 140. I was on my last torque. I start at 60, go up 20 inch-pounds at a time. So you're going to end at 150. Like when you jump from 140 to 150, you're only going up 10 inch-pounds. And she snapped. So another reason not to go with the Chinese knockoff rod. That sucks, because I've reused ARC rods before. Never has it broke before. So now it's like, what do? Do we throw a quality rod and call that a fail? That's a fail to me, even though, okay, so it didn't fail in the bike, but the problem is an ARC uses ARP, so you could reuse the bolts. So you could change the rod bearings and technically use the rod bolts. I mean, the rod bolts are pretty cheap. I'd probably replace those too if you're doing a rebuild, but I've retorqued them plenty of times. So what to do? All right, so that actually came out really nice. So snapped right before the threads. Normally they stretch in the thread zone, so that's out. Rod's perfectly fine. We could just buy some rod bolts, but we come over here. Me and Lonnie was looking at the bolt that didn't break, and it did torque down the spec. We have it centered in the lathe here, so let's turn it on and look how much wobble the threads have. Hello. Come on. I think you can see that. She bent too, baby. So question at hand is, do we just buy some ARP bolts and put in this cheap rod? Now that I'm going to consider the rod bolts as a fail, because who knows if those are stress fractures from where we rode it. The thing vibrates like the dickens. One of the worst engines we've ever built, for sure. And it's probably that piston, that heavy piston that we got. Okay, so what I've decided to do since we broke that rod bolt is call the rod bolts a fail. So as we break this thing down and keep on testing it, we'll just tell you what parts failed in our opinion and what parts lasted. So rod bolts have failed, so we're going to pull. We keep some used rods and stuff on the shelf. This is a used ARC rod. And like I said earlier, ARC uses ARP bolts. So we pulled some good quality bolts out of this rod. We're just going to shelf this. I'll probably order some more bolts to put back with this, but we're going to replace it and get these new bolts put in. We're just going to put everything back together and keep on running it. So I want you guys to tell us what you think about these cheap parts. Do you think, and the last comment seemed like everybody would support companies like EC Carburetors, ARC, NR Racing, instead of buying these cheap knockoff parts and real parts like gauge rockers and the EC rockers. But I want to know what you guys think. Would you go cheap if you was building an engine right now? Would you buy these knockoff parts? I will tell you the biggest difference I could tell between a quality built engine and a cheap built engine is, again, the vibrations was horrendous in this engine. It would vibrate your hands off. And that's most likely due to the weight of this piston that came with that Chinese kit. That's one big thing EC tries to do, is make lightweight pistons, especially when you go with their stroker kits and stuff. You're reducing the weight, which helps to balance out the engine. It's impossible, like we've talked about in the past, to fully balance a single cylinder engine. You're never going to be able to do it, but the lighter you can make the piston and stuff, the better it'll do. So I think that was the biggest issue with the vibrations. Literally, your hands felt like you've been weed eating for an hour after 30 minutes of trail riding. High speeds wasn't so bad, but cruising around that like 3 to 4,500, 3 to 5,000 range was the worst. So I'll get this thing put back together and we'll continue beating on it on the channel. I just want to know what you guys would buy if you was actually spending the money right now and buying parts like this. We want to know. So thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Let me know what you think. Everything seemed to wear fine. It was just unfortunate that both rod bolts basically failed when I went to retorque them. And that's just the quality of it. They copied the ARP bolt to a T. China did. It's just the quality of the materials they're made out of. At the end of the day is the biggest difference. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to check out the links in the video description because they do help us continue to do these videos. We'll see you on the next torture test update on this Chinese Predator 212 engine build. We love you guys and God bless.